Hello, everybody, and a very, very warm welcome to this I cannot tell you how important this webinar is on global differences between maternity leave and returning to work. My name is Joeli Brearley. I'm the founder of the charity and campaign group Pregnant Then Screwed and author of The Truth About the Motherhood Penalty and How to Fix It. For today's webinar, we have a really illustrious panel of absolutely badass mothers who are all very senior in the automotive industry, and they are going to talk about their experience of both maternity leave and returning to work. And I want everybody who is on this call to listen very carefully, because this conversation is critical if we are to have any hope of solving gender inequality in the workplace. There are huge global differences when it comes to parental leave policy. Norway, for example, offers 49 weeks on full pay. Sweden offers parents 390 days at 80% of salary. Meanwhile, the only federal law guaranteeing maternity leave in the US is unpaid, and it applies only to some employees. 1 in 4 women in America go back to work after just 10 days leave, which I personally think is barbaric. I couldn't get dressed after 10 days leave, so I have no idea how any woman manages to do that. Here in the UK, we have a generous maternity leave in terms of length, but one of the worst maternity leaves in Europe when it comes to pay, with just 6 weeks paid at 90% of salary, and then the next 33 weeks are paid at £184 a week, which is less than half of the national minimum wage. So it's less than half of what we are told is the minimum that you can live on. And the last 3 months are unpaid. This results in hundreds of thousands of families starting their new life in debt, and it also means that many mothers are returning to work well before they are ready, which can often trigger postnatal depression. And don't get me started about our paternity leave system, which is absolutely dire. Return to work experiences differ from company to company, from manager to manager, yet we know that this is a hugely sensitive and challenging time for all new parents, especially mothers. And it is this return to work experience that will have the greatest influence as to whether your employee stays with you and becomes a highly productive and dedicated member of staff, or whether they leave. This transition to motherhood for women, a transition some people now refer to as matrescence, can be the making or the breaking of a woman's career. If you care about the women in your organisation, then you need to care about maternity leave and the return to work process for new mothers. Today is an opportunity for you to listen to women who have had that experience and are here to share their thoughts and insights with you. It's a gift. It's a gift to you. Trust me, for many women, it is really hard to talk about this stuff because sometimes it is peppered with trauma and it can bring up all sorts of challenging feelings. And it is really rare that women are offered this space and this opportunity to come together and to talk candidly about probably the most important, the most exhausting, the most chaotic and absurd and magical experience of our entire life. Today, we will hear about that experience and how company and country-wide policies influence whether their experience was positive or negative. So without further ado, I am delighted to introduce you to Drishti, Trivedi, Sophie Bond, and Aleksandra Mårtensson. Let's start with Aleksandra. Aleksandra, could you introduce yourself, tell us a bit about your life, your work, and your family.
My name is Aleksandra Mårtensson. I'm also Polish, so don't be fooled by my Swedish name. I have been working in the automotive industry for the past 16 years, I think. in most roles of Agile settings, and I'm currently line manager in a company providing backend software solutions for telematics in cars, wireless car. So I'm responsible for individuals, their personal development, also parental leave planning for both men and women, and also team development, recruitment, and driving events and driving actions and policies within the company that matter for our employees. I am a mother of three. All three of my children were born in Sweden, so I was able to take in the Swedish experience of motherhood, but it was also a little bit surprising for me coming from Poland. I thought I knew how things are going, like what the rules of the game are, and in Polish reality they're a little bit different. So Sweden definitely surprised me in the positive. So my parental leave experience was nothing short of great, to be honest.
Great, brilliant. We're going to hear a little bit more about that in a minute. Thank you. Drishti, over to you.
Hello everyone, my name is Drishti Trivedi. I'm really excited to be here today. I moved to United States around 2015 to pursue my career in electrical engineering and electronics, as I was very passionate to work in automotive industry. Since then, I've been fortunate enough to given an opportunity and continue to do so since 2015. A little bit more about me. I've been working in this field for almost 10 to 12 years now. Currently, I'm a supervisor at North American Lighting for the Electronics Developmental Group, and I'm exclusively supporting customers like Honda, Toyota to build their exterior lighting, not only for current vehicles but for future models as well. Um, on a personal note and on the family note, I'm currently a new mother to an 11-week-old baby girl, and have been fortunate enough. She's my first child, so the feeling is mutual between all of us who have gone through that experience. Um, I'm already back to work, if that's the next question. And currently, I do have some support from my family who's helping me out, especially my husband, because he's currently not, he was laid off because of the automotive industry, struggling a little bit. But yeah, that's the story. I'm here and I'm excited for this opportunity and to share more and to connect with you all. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Drishti. Sophie, over to you.
Thank you, Joeli. So my name's Sophie Bond. I have been in the automotive industry for over 15 years. I am a proud mother of two children. I have a 6-year-old girl and an 11-year-old boy, both of whom were born in the UK. But I now live in Switzerland. I've lived here for the last 4 years, and I am the European HR Director for LKQ Europe, meaning I am responsible, along with my peers across our business, for 26,500 people within our organisation, and working in HR. Obviously, the topics that we're discussing today are very close to my heart, not just personally with my own journeys, which we'll talk about shortly, but also in terms of how we treat the people within LKQ, and also being a large player in the automotive organisation, how we can help impact and raise awareness as an organisation to other organisations who manage large groups of colleagues to make that difference and to raise awareness and support women and men, parents in general, when returning to work after having had a small human. So that's me.
Amazing. Thank you. Okay, right. We're going to move into parental leave. So I'd really like to know a bit about your experience of parental leave. What worked well? What didn't work well? Aleksandra, let's start with you.
Like I said in the beginning, my experience of parental leave in Sweden has been fantastic, really, really positive. And it started off with the whole situation of communicating to my employer that I was pregnant. I was in a little bit vulnerable situation because I had just moved to Sweden. I just got a job. I think it was the 4th month of my fresh employment. And I know how these things go down in Poland, in my native country. Women, usually when they communicate too early that they're pregnant, they're usually laid off. Sometimes when you're a young woman and you get married, even if you don't have children, preemptively, you're being laid off because you got married, then you're going to start a family, and then you will be a burden. So I waited for 4 months, and then I was mentally prepared that, okay, I'm going to tell my boss now. There's no point hiding it, but I know what's going to happen. I know how it's going to go down. And I remember calling him, and I was really serious. And when we spoke, and it's like, oh, but what's happening? Are you okay? And I was like, yeah, because I know what's going to happen, and how it's like, I know what your reaction is going to be, but I'm fine. I'll take it. You know, it's okay. I just found out that I'm pregnant, and it was just, oh my God, that's so great. He hugged me and said, oh, fantastic news. So how far along are you? When are you due? I didn't really know what happened there in that conversation. It's like, October. Like, oh, there's so much time left until October. Don't worry. Just focus on yourself. We're going to sort everything. And I was just dumbfounded.
Yeah.
for a good couple of weeks. And then I started taking in the entire system and what actually I can do if the reception of this kind of news is so good. So I wasn't forced at any point in any of my 3 pregnancies to stipulate when I will go on parental leave. I was given the option to go earlier if I felt bad, if I couldn't go to the office. So working from home was definitely an option. Flexible time of work. This is kind of a staple in IT in Sweden. So it was not given to me specifically because I was pregnant, but that's something that's a tool that we all have to be able to balance our personal life and labor life in a good way. And then coming closer to actually delivery and planning, staying home. Also, no rush. I spent 13 months with all 3 of my children staying home, which might seem like quite a long time, but it did not really affect my employment or my relationship with my employer in any way. Everything waited for me. I could, when I came back to work, or said when I wanted to come back to work, I was asked, do you want to come back 100%? Do you want 50? Do you want 75? Do you want to work 3 days a week, maybe? Do you want to have Fridays off or Tuesdays off? Or how do you want to plan it? I mean, this is something that in Sweden does not fall on the employer, the burden of financing this setup. It's the parental leave that you can take out in fractions that you choose. You can either take an entire day, or you can take 25% of a day, or 1 day a week. You can fraction it and take it out to your so it fits your life best. Same when children got sick once they were already in the kindergarten. I mean, this is not something that the employer pays for. So I could just call and say, hey, I'm staying home today. Kid is sick. Fine, no problem. I think Försäkringskassan, so the social insurance agency, starts to wonder what's happening with the child if the child's been sick for 180 days. So during the year. So there's a lot of flexibility there. My husband spent 3 next months with the children at home, so they were very well taken care of before they reached the stage of going to daycare. And the best thing for me was that after each parental leave, I was actually offered an opportunity to reinvent myself. My manager was in contact with me throughout my parental leave the whole year. In Sweden, there's a rule that regulates that, I mean, basically, if you feel like you're being treated wrongly and the basis for it is you being pregnant or on parental leave, then you get a lot of support. This actually falls under discrimination law. So there's very strict law on what can happen and what cannot happen to your salary level when you're on parental leave or on a leave because of pregnancy. So my salary did not really suffer, and every time that I came back, I was able to, like I said, reinvent myself. I was asked, "Do you want to continue doing what you have? Do you want something else? Do you want something new?" So actually, after every single pregnancy, I got courses, I got opportunities to do something else, to actually grow. And the things that I have right now in life, I mean, maybe I could have had them those 4 years earlier, because I spent almost 4 years at home with my children, but nothing was delayed specifically. I mean, those things just waited for me to come back and to be claimed. So my experience is really, really good.
I am absolutely thrilled to hear you had such a fantastic experience. I'm sure many people listening to this call, and I'm sure Drishti and to some extent Sophie are both looking at you a little bit enviously, because that really is the nirvana. And just a reminder to everybody, Aleksandra had her experience in Sweden. So this is what you could have had if you lived in Sweden. We're now going to talk to Drishti, whose
Ah,
experience is in the US. So we're going probably from one extreme to another, I think, here. Drishti, over to you.
yeah, I should have moved to Sweden, but well, I was in States, right? So I live in Windsor, but I work in Michigan. So I choose to move to Windsor, Canada, across the border during COVID times because I'm an immigrant in US, just to have more stability. So I had my child in Canada, but because I work in States, I had no benefits, right? So the benefits technically depend in United States, especially. So I did some research about it, and that is one of the reasons we were delaying to have a child, so that we have more stability financially to have a child, because there is technically uh, 12 weeks of FMLA, which is like a family leave or FMLA, but that may or may not be given to you paid or unpaid. So every woman, like you said, 1 in 10 women in US go back to work within 10 to 15 days. There is a reason, because financially they cannot afford it,
Mhm.
right? So in our case, in my case at least, my company, they have a short-term disability combined with FMLA. Uh, yeah, it is like a short-term disability. They consider it's not the company, but it's the insurances across US which consider pregnancy like a disability sometimes. The way it is said, you get 6 weeks, 50 to 60% pay if it is a vaginal birth, and you get 8 weeks for C-section, again 50 to 60% pay.
Mhm.
So technically, you have to go back after that or use your personal leaves and go back, right? In my situation, my baby was born end of like in the beginning of the November time frame. So I was a little bit fortunate because I could combine it with my Christmas break. uh, it was an unfortunate situation in my case because right before my delivery, my husband was laid off from his work. He's also an automotive engineer, so we both are into automotive industry. And right now, since the industry is not doing good, many are facing layoffs, and he was part of that. So I was in this situation where I was like, okay, I'll take short term disability. I'll go on 50, 60% pay. Then I'll combine it with my personal leave and get some time so that I can spend it with my baby girl. But I had to end up using my personal vacations so that I don't go on 50 to 60% pay. Because financially, we wouldn't have been able to afford it given we are having a newborn coming into our life,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And of course, my personal leave were collected over 7+ years because I've worked with my current company for 7+ years. So every year you get 10 to 15 days and you accumulate that. And I ended up using those. Now I have none in the funnel. They will
Yeah.
get accumulated for 2025 separately. But uh, the other thing I want to tell is in United States, when you get these leaves, you cannot break them off. Like companies with especially short-term disability, they don't want you to break the 6 weeks off. So if you're taking 6 weeks and if your baby is born around November, December timeframe, they consider Christmas break also within that. So the 6 weeks stays 6 weeks. It doesn't become 8 weeks if there is a 2 week off for a Christmas.
Yeah.
And that's when I made this decision that, hey, the entire company gets paid 100% on that, like at least the Farmington Hills branch for that time, for the
Mhm.
2 week, 1.5 week of Christmas break. Why would I go on a short term disability? And affordability was also an issue.
Yeah.
So that is my part on it. But that worked for me, at least in terms of, that I was able to get the Christmas break. So I could get at least 1.5 week of extra time to gear up, go back. What doesn't work for me because I'm in it right now, the breastfeeding journey,
Yeah.
going back to work, especially cross border, it's
Mhm.
almost 60 to 65 minutes of drive for me.
Yeah.
um, and the guilt of a mom leaving literally a 6 and a 7 week old at home. I was able to build a support system where I was able to call my mom all the way from India to help me out. And my husband losing a job in that situation has added up like a boon for that phase of time. But if my husband finds a job and he has to go all days, we are screwed because my mom is going leaving us by end of this month. It's already there, like it's end of January, and I still have an 11-week-old with me. So managing that is going to be difficult. We do have a hybrid work policy at my workplace, so that is an added benefit of somewhat, but I still have to go 3 days a week, right?
Yeah.
And we all have been there. Breastfeeding is not easy. And because of this, we had to make a choice of introducing formula to my child so that because not all mothers are blessed with abundance of supply. So at least she'll be able to be fed when I'm gone to work for extended hours when I'm unable to, provide her as much as breast milk as needed.
And how long is that journey from the point that you leave your door to go to work to when you get back? How many
It's
hours?
almost 9.5 to 10 hours because if you include it's 65 minutes going, 65 minutes coming, then spending 8 hours at work, that doesn't include the lunch break which we do. So if you calculate and if there are wait times at the border between US and Canada, I am screwed. It can go up to 10 to 10.5 hours to 11 hours.
And can you tell us very briefly how the mental toll it's taking on you?
When you rob something and you get like you have robbed something or you have copied in an exam and that fear gripping you that hey, I'll be caught. It's
Yeah.
that type of fear when I had to step into work after the Christmas break. It's I cannot describe it in a better words, but it's always a feeling that oh, what if it's this fear, it's a very gripping fear. Like I remember my 10th boards and my exams, what if I fail? It's that type of feeling. What if because if I fail, I ruin not only myself, I ruin somebody who's looking up to me. Already becoming a new mom and knowing that hey, a newborn is with you and you are the world for that newborn. You have a separate world, but for that baby you are the world,
Yeah.
and not messing that childhood and that world for her is a constant feeling which I'm battling right now.
Yeah.
And I know that postpartum depression, these are big words, but they're all true.
Of course.
They're
Yeah.
all true because being from an Asian culture, we are always told, hey, that's normal. Hey, this is fine. Hey, we did it. Why can't you? But we forget that it's a different world now.
Of course.
Previously, women used to not work and be like a homemaker where they were able to have multiple kids and take care of them. I'm in a fear of even having like a second child in a future. Like with one, I'm outnumbered. I don't know how I can make it better for her, be there for her. The first day I stepped into the work, it was a Thursday, I remember, and I came home after my 10 hours and I could see my child crying. Like she's literally 10 weeks, she was literally 9 weeks old. And my mom video called me. She said, I understand the meaning of a mother because whole day between me and your husband, we are unable to take care of her, even though she's fed. Her eyes are always looking around.
Yeah.
She wants that warmth of the mother, which she didn't get for almost 10 to
Oh
11
my
hours.
God. Yeah, I mean, listen, if President Trump is listening to this webinar, which I'm sure he is, we need properly paid parental leave in the US. It is absolutely devastating that it doesn't exist, I think. And, we really need some action on that. B. Jarrett, who's Senior Learning and Development Consultant, says, Drishti, you're doing an amazing job. And she says she's feeling very emotional for you
Thank
and
you so much.
sending you lots of love. Anybody that's listening, please do add your comments or your questions. We will be responding to them shortly. Sophie, over to you.
Yeah, firstly, before I start and talk about my journey, I just want to echo the words of B, because when we were scoping this call out together a few weeks ago, Drishti's story really, really touched me. It is shocking and really emotional to hear how you're having to deal with that and how many other women in very similar positions are going through this right now. So yeah, just wanted to recognize that. I think for me, I'm kind of sat somewhere in the middle of the two stories you've just heard, because I had both of my children in the UK, and I, whilst being very ambitious at the time and probably midway through my career in automotive, I did put a lot of pressure on myself to come back to the workplace, not just for the financial reasons that Joeli's already highlighted with our pretty poor statutory maternity leave policy from a financial perspective in the UK, but it was also with me that feeling that I needed to get back because I needed to keep the trajectory going with my career. I didn't want to miss out. I didn't want to be away from the workplace for too long. So whilst the statutory maternity leave in the UK was all right, and I got by and we made it work between myself and my husband financially. It wasn't ideal. I think my story is a little bit more around less the actual maternity leave itself, putting me in that position, more me mentally as a working mother, putting myself under the pressure to go back to work for many reasons. And when I did go back, I mean, it was different with my second child to an extent, but definitely with my first. I think what I wanted to highlight on this call in terms of my experience was that huge feeling of imposter syndrome that I had, that feeling that I didn't belong anymore, struggling to balance the emotions and the hormonal surges that you naturally get as a breastfeeding mother, as a new parent, thinking about this little tiny person that you've brought into the world, and then also having to think about all the topics that surround you when you're in that working or corporate environment. And that's the piece that I'm hugely passionate about. I think the differences in maternity leave and listening to the stories of Aleksandra and Drishti as two extremes are shocking, as a base foundation to this whole topic. But I also think there's so much more that can be done to support us outside of policy, in terms of educating colleagues around us, people in the workplace, building supportive environments for new parents. And I think that is also hugely missing outside of policy and financial topics surrounding maternity leave. And that's what I felt at the time. And I'm not saying that it was anybody's fault. My company were pretty supportive to me throughout both of my pregnancies, and I had some flexibility and I got through the statutory situation okay. But I put huge amounts of pressure on myself, and being in a male-dominated environment as well. I remember being sat at the boardroom table, as an example, when I went back after my first child. He was about 6 months old, and I was still breastfeeding in the morning and the evening. So I still had hormones. I was still missing him. I had this huge mum guilt surrounding me when I was, back in work. So I had all of that going on. But then I also seemed to have lost some confidence somehow. And every time eyes turned to me in the room, or I made a comment and people looked at me, I just felt so incredibly uncomfortable, embarrassed. There was this feeling of just wanting to sink under the table and disappear. And I couldn't understand where that had come from. And it very much was related, I'm sure, to the fact that I was in a completely new situation with new feelings, new thoughts, new empathy, new hormones that I'd never had to deal with before I'd had a child. And I do think there's so much more we can do to educate policies, companies, people in general in the workplace around how that feeling works and what we can do to support new parents returning, so that we can ensure that they are the most productive, happy, engaged version of themselves. So for me, as much as, I would have loved probably 12 months off on 90% pay and to be able to spend a lot more unpressurized time with my children, I'm very passionate about that piece around how we actually facilitate a healthy return to the workplace.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you, Sophie. We've had some comments from some of the listeners here. Gabriela Tenante, she says it's a challenge for women in the industry, and in Mexico, they only have 4 weeks leave. Some companies give 8 if the mother has a baby that has a disability, but 4 weeks is not enough. 8 weeks if your child has a disability is definitely not enough.
Yeah.
We don't even stop bleeding, right, by the 4 weeks time.
No.
Like some women are still recovering and healing with the
Yeah.
stitches.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I
And the
don't get it.
mental piece, you know, like as I've just mentioned, this whole hormonal element, we're all different, and it can take one person 8, 9, 10 weeks to kind of settle into a new hormonal routine, getting control of emotions. It could take another person 12 months. And, you know, I'm sure that there's like a moderation we can find somewhere in the midst of all of that. But if we're not even taking into consideration, and we're not recognizing the fact that getting to grips with the mental load of returning to work as a new parent is really hard, and we don't give people a little bit of a break around that, whether they're a mother or a father, because for the fathers it's also very difficult. And there's many topics around paternity leave and men supporting women in their new roles and in that whole new dynamic in a family. We just need to do more, I think, to educate and get the whole community, working community, to understand how that feels, because it's tough.
Yeah. If you have any questions or anything you'd like to add, please do add them into the chat box. Sophia Richards lives in the UK, and she had to go back at 3 months because it's all she could afford. And she works from home, aside from meetings in and around London and Cambridge, but they couldn't afford enough childcare, so she had to spend a lot of time juggling a 10-month-old and work. And obviously you don't get much done when you've got a 10-month-old and you're trying to work. She's lucky enough to have a supportive partner who also works from home, but the majority of the labour fell to her with the baby because she was still breastfeeding and didn't want to stop. Childcare is a big issue, of course, for many parents in the UK. We have one of the most expensive childcare systems in the world, and it's also really difficult to get childcare. In Sweden, you have a much better childcare system than exists in the US and exists in the UK and exists in Switzerland. Switzerland has a very expensive childcare system as well.
Does, yes,
very
absolutely.
expensive. In fact, I think Switzerland, it's the competition between New Zealand and Switzerland as to which is the most expensive. It's very
expensive over here.
Yeah.
But if I can add one comment when it comes to childcare in Sweden, that is the spoon of bitterness in the jar of honey. Because as much as when you're pregnant and when you're coming back, you have the pool of 480 days that you can split between two parents. And you can also take them out in chunks and fractions until the child is 8 years of age. It is not that you're not that autonomous when it comes to choosing childcare, especially if it's not your first child but second. You don't get what you need, you get what you deserve. That's kind of the feeling. So when it's your second child, your older child is allowed to be in the kindergarten 15 hours a week. And you are not the one who chooses if those 15 hours are 3 days, 5 hours, or 2.5 days. It's the kindergarten that decides. So I was actually faced with a situation when it was my third. So my oldest was already in primary school, so it had specific hours. The kindergarten for my middle child stipulated that they would wish to have the child in the kindergarten for 2 hours a day, between 9:30 and 11:30. And I was with a baby. So I would basically have to first go in the morning, drop the older one at school, then come back, get the middle one, get them to the kindergarten, go home, feed the baby, and then come back and start. Impossible. So I could solve it in the end, but it was not made easy for me. So that's the little bitterness that I can chip in.
It's not all sunshine and roses in Sweden.
No, that was. I mean, it felt really, and also the treatment that you get from some people in the childcare industry, let's call it, or area. I mean, it was very degrading. I heard some comments that were not. Not suitable to say to a mother of 3. I mean, it is a big burden. And if you hear that, well, no one really told you to have 3 kids, and you should have realized that when you have 3, the youngest just has to follow the other ones and the family a little bit longer. But that's not the same thing as telling you that you need to go back and forth with the trolley, you know. So yeah, it was not something that was unsolvable, but in the whole litany of pinky, rosy, and fantastic things, that was the only thing that, yeah, was solvable, but did not really work very well from the start.
I did not know that, Aleksandra.
No.
Thank you for giving us that insight. Holly Goodberry says that if remote working was taken away from their family, then it wouldn't be worth her working. So I think that's a really, really interesting point, that lots of employers potentially don't understand the impact of return to the office mandates that we're seeing implemented in many countries and by many employers at the moment, the impact that has on women in particular, who tend to be the main carers. And it can make it completely impossible to be able to keep a job as well as have a family or care for an elderly person. So I'd like us to just have a quick think about and talk about policies that we think companies in particular can implement, and policies that perhaps either supported you or policies that you have seen other companies implement that you think, oh, that would have made such a difference to my life, so that we can help the people that are listening think about policies they would like to implement in their company to ensure that women are able to have children and have a career, because that's what we all want, surely, everybody. So, Aleksandra, can I start with you? What policies do you think made a big difference for you?
There's one thing I would like to also correct a little bit when it comes to the financial aspect. It is 80% but of the salary that you get throughout the parental leave, but not throughout all of the parental leave. And it actually goes, it's the 80% but of your sick day salary. So it's not your full nominal salary. So depending on what your salary level is, starting off, there's also a cap on the tax office side, like up to which amount they actually pay out of your nominal salary, the sick day based parental leave is paid. So if your salary is quite high, and in the automotive industry, in the IT, I mean, we have good salaries, and the difference between salaries between men and women in Sweden, I mean, is basically non-existent, or at least that's what it is what it has been in the organizations that I've been working with. Then let's say the impact of being on parental leave when you suddenly hit the cap and you get 80% of the cap, I mean, that's a big blow. So what companies do, and that's what my employers did and my husband's employers as well, is to offer a top-up to this 80% of sick pay, up to 90% of your real nominal pay for 6 months. And that, I think, is something that makes a lot of difference. Now, Swedish state wants to regulate and kind of regulate the amount of days people take out and make sure that the burden of being home with children is equally, or as equally as possible, distributed between men and women, so fathers and mothers. And there are some days from the parental leave that only the father has to take. 90 days are just for the father. All the other days that the parents can kind of share between them. So that helps. This top up to 90% of your nominal salary helps to kind of distribute that burden of staying home, because in de facto, as a mom, you can stay home for 6 months with 90% of your real salary. Then you can choose to stay a couple of more months with just 80%, and then your husband can stay home for another 6 months with 90% of your salary. Not all companies do that, but I think this is a great addition. And if that was commonplace, or even if the cap at the tax office was raised, I think that would solve a lot of problems.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. So essentially properly paid parental leave that is generous in terms of time and money is essential to parents being able to look after their children and not be worrying and not be thinking they have to go back early and not be digging themselves into debt or using their credit cards. Drishti.
See, for me, the answer is simple. The country should have more maternity leave. But going on to company policies, there are some companies, apart from the basic FMLA or the basic short term disability, they have their own company standards of maternity leaves. Major OEMs like Ford, Bosch, Bosch even has like parental leave where the paternity leave of 6 weeks, which is equivalent to a woman getting for a vaginal birth, right? Vaginal birth. So I would suggest for company policies, they should have like a separate maternity leave where they are ready to support women up to at least minimum 12 weeks. uh, Given that there are some companies who are giving 12 weeks 100% pay, so at least they can do that to top off like what Alexandra said, just to have a separate maternity leave, because in US there is no maternity leave, right? It's based on company to company. It's like a lottery. The company you go into, if they have the maternity leave, you win the lottery, or else you don't, right? So I want those policies to be imbibed. I know that a country or their mindset cannot be changed overnight, right? But even like managerial level or next to next level, where the companies need to be educated, like Sophie said, they need to understand that giving birth to a human is not easy. And I was on the other part of the spectrum when I was single, like not having a child. Okay, you give birth to a child. We do see women in Walmart after 5 days of giving birth to a child in US. So okay, it's normal. But hey, I'm even from the other part of the spectrum in Asia, like countries like India have 6 months fully paid leaves as well. And they are still coming under developing countries. So, what about the countries which are already developed,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you get the gist. I don't want to pinpoint, but at this point, that's what I'm trying to say. Companies need to have like push ups coming to this country where they don't have maternity leave, why we need them, flexibility at work, like work from home. In some of the comments I see from Holly, if there is no work from home, okay, you want us back to work, make it happen, but give us some time, at least till the child turns 6 months or when the baby is able to start solids, so that it's not that much stress for a mother, right? Breastfeeding, taking care of the baby, everything a father cannot do. I'm sorry, but they don't have boobs, right? So
Yeah.
so once they have that, okay, fine. But that's what I'm trying to say, that have flexibility, have understanding. There are 60% women in United States dropping after giving birth to a child and then regaining after some time. Unfortunately, I don't have that leisure, because not only because of financial state, but because I'm an immigrant, right? I am come to this country of free land to make a career and to be where I want to be. I'm at the peak of it, and I'm even at the peak of a motherhood right now.
Yeah.
So, flexibility, understanding, education, and if companies can have their own maternal policy which supports women, that would be great.
Yeah.
Because the last time we were at Women in Automotive at Detroit on a roundtable conference, the biggest discussion was how can companies support more women? And the first topic which came up was, do they have maternity leaves? Because that's what now women have started looking into when they were applying for jobs. We have so much good talent and we
Yeah.
are wasting 80% of it because we don't have good policies in place.
Brilliant. Thank you, Drishti.
Yeah.
Sophie.
I think for me, it's especially because I'm in HR, I would focus more on the softer topics. I think policy in general, having paid maternity leave and supportive maternity policies and parental leave policies is key. But I think the softer piece as well, in terms of entry back into the workplace, is absolutely essential. And it starts with education. I think there needs to be a lot more done to educate the workforce, the companies, the corporate entities that employ so many people and have a corporate social responsibility to the people that they employ. And as new parents, as a new mother going back into the workforce, you are raising the next generation of the world. These little people are going to be the individuals that shape the future. So for me, that needs as much safeguarding and positivity and respect as it possibly can have. So I think education and representation are key. Companies that will speak about these topics, have conversations like the one we're having today, to showcase to new parents, to new mothers, that yes, there's a lot of challenges out there in the world of returning to work after having had a baby. And we've just talked about so many of them. But I think also focusing on the positivity that it can bring. And I know for me as a woman, and we have many conversations about this in our own women's network in LKQ, there are so many positives that I have experienced in my individual self since I did come back to the workplace after having had children. I feel I'm more empathic. I feel I understand and see different perspectives and look at different perspectives in a different way than I did before I had kids. I think that there are so many positive attributes to the way that I deal with interpersonal connections and the way that I look at my career holistically compared to before I had children. And, you know, everybody's experience is different, but I think it's so good and empowering for new parents and new mothers to put this positive stance on it. You can bring such amazing skills to the workplace as a mother, as a parent, because you do think about things in a different way. You bring a different perspective. And when we talk about companies being so much more successful, there's science behind this, there's statistics behind the fact that diverse leadership teams bring success to corporate organizations. And this is just another part of that diverse perspective. Parents, new mothers returning to the workplace will bring success if they're looked after and nurtured properly. Yeah. So I think the education piece is really important for me. And also the support network. We're looking at LKQ at the moment into a buddying program, so that we identify new mothers returning to the workplace and we offer them support of a like-minded individual in the business that they can go to and have a safe space to talk about the way they're feeling, imposter syndrome, mum guilt, a feeling of emotional overwhelm in a meeting. Because these things, they do affect you on a daily basis when you're a new parent in the workplace. And if you don't have a safe space to go and even just offload to, every now and again, that can lead to overwhelm, burnout, and you dropping out of the workforce, because you just simply, it's not just the logistics of managing maternity leave, but it's also the mental load and the psychological impact that it has on you. And I think if companies could do more to face into this, they would be able to retain not just women through that first 6 to 12 months, but much longer into the future, because they're engaged, they feel supported, they feel stable, they feel much more steady and respected. Yeah. So I think education and support are absolutely key, and promoting the benefits of what amazing qualities a new parent can bring to the workplace, what great perspectives we bring, because we do.
We do. There is loads of evidence that if you get this right, then working mums are some of the most productive people that you can hire. And there's lots of data from Microsoft and other companies where they've looked at this and they've found that mums, particularly mums of 2 children, actually are really, really productive. I mean, if you want something done, give it to a busy person, right? Really productive. They're really in tune with their staff. They're incredible leaders, because maternity leave is actually an elite training course for management in many ways.
Is. I totally agree with that, Joeli.
That you develop over that period, and yet we are stigmatized as being less committed and more distracted from our jobs, and the data tells a completely different story. So if you are a new mum listening, please take that with you, that you may feel that things are tough and that you're not doing a good job, because it can feel like that when you're trying to manage children and a career. It feels like it's completely impossible. But actually, the stuff that you have learned on maternity leave is completely invaluable. And once it kicks in and you feel ready and you're back in your groove, you will be incredible. Trust me, you will be such a good employee.
And don't be scared to be vulnerable. That was something that I was not good at before I had children. I was always putting a front on. I always wanted to walk in the room and be the strongest personality and not show a crack or a chink of weakness. But when I came back, especially after my second child, I was okay with being vulnerable. And I was okay to say every now and again, do you know what? I'm not feeling myself today, or this has really emotionally moved me, or just being a little bit closely connected to the colleagues around me from an emotional perspective, because I allowed myself to be more vulnerable. And new mums need to know that as well, that if you do have a day or you do have a new way of looking at the world that you feel more emotional in general after having had a baby. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It is not a sin. It is not a fault. It is something that you can make a superpower.
Exactly that. Yes, brilliantly said, Sophie. Listen, we're running out of time. We've had lots of really great comments, lots of people really interested in the challenges of breastfeeding and working. Sarah wanted to talk about falling birth rates and the impact they're having on the labour market, because they are already having a big impact on the labour market, and the reason why those birth rates might be falling, which is a whole topic in itself. I could talk at length about this, but I'm afraid we just won't have time today now. Thank you everybody for joining, and I just want to send some love and well wishes to anybody listening who's holding a new baby right now, listening to this, thinking this all feels so overwhelming. It does get easier. It gets a lot easier, I promise. Thank you to Drishti, to Sophie, to Aleksandra, and I hope you all have a lovely rest of your Friday. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Joeli. Thank you, everyone, for being there. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
It's been great to speak. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.